Okay, here we go again. In the last session, I read from a book called Midnight, and it was about the adventures of a young gangbanger going to Accra, Ghana, West Africa, and spending, I think, 2 weeks and having his life changed around. And what else can I say other than that? And I suddenly found myself involved with, once again, nights. The book that I'm about to read from now is called Brazilian Nights. And I think it's again a little groove I ran up into. Like, it was night here, it was night there, and night and night.
Okay.
Without giving away too much, Brazilian Nights explores the possibility of what would happen if you or anyone have the opportunity to have like a 2-year sabbatical to go off and explore whatever your interest took you to. In this case, I was turned on to this story by a stray piece of paper being blown down the street. True story. Piece of paper about as large as a piece of cigarette paper, something like that. And on this piece of paper was a name, Valonga, V-A-L-O-N-G-A. That's all. I picked up the paper, brought it home like most creative people do, trying to figure out what it all means and what could I do with it. And I came up with the idea of exploring the lifestyle of a woman who was the CEO of a stress reduction company. In this time and in this day and age, especially, she fits right in. She would be one of those people that you go to who could help you understand what you needed to do in order to keep your nerves from being on edge. In her company, each one of the employees has 2 years. She's on her sabbatical now, that's where it starts. And I'll let it go on from there.
Okay. And
the book is called Brazilian Nights.
Okay, and it's a picture of the nighttime in Brazil, we'll say.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you took this picture. I was so glad that you did this because so frequently they picture Brazil, they picture Rio or Bahia or Sao Paulo. It's one of these cities that's just blossoming and glowing with the lights, and everybody just, doing the samba down the streets and so forth and so on. And we know that that's not completely the case.
Yes, it shows the palm trees in the moonlight.
Yeah, palm trees and moonlight. And there are times, I'm sure, when those are the only things that are happening.
And there we go.
Especially in the favelas where people are suffering with disease and hunger and all kinds of economic disparities. They've been pushed out of the edge of the city into the center of the city. And I'm not going to say anything like that more. Let me start it off by offering you a little bit of a prologue. After hours of making slow motion love, after the mutual exchange of love feelings, he, the man, stood up and backed away from her, smiling, leaving her with a perfect memory. She didn't feel the urge to know him beyond the point that they had been together. It had been perfect, no need to spoil it with any emotions beyond the ones that they had shared. Malana seemed to flow back into Valonga's field of vision, her body steaming from a brief dip in the river. A word of caution, Valonga. You can get what you wish here, if the vibe is right. Valonga slowly opened her eyes and stared through the porthole above her bed. Juan Rojo Diablo was the man she'd made love to on her fantasy dream trip. with Malana the breeder, she felt absolutely certain that he was the man. Okay, well, we're opening with a little bit of mystery here, but there's a lot in this book that is mysterious. It was first published in 1992 and then reissued in 2012. Seems to me it might be in need of an update, but I'll leave that in more capable hands than mine. I'll leave it in the hands of one Zola Salena-Hawkins, better known to some people in Africa as Mad Zola.
All right.
Prologue. Chiloka, Marias, Timba, Rahim, Farai, Jumok, the Bay. Others came to the loft on San Pablo in Oakland. The loft was supposed to be in the neighborhood was in. The video of Cedric's at Master Bimba's school in Bahia tells us that. Or maybe it's only a vicious simile. Valonga, this orphan-named creature who floated down wind-blown streets on strips of fortune teller cookie paper. This unknown woman who suggested cosmic thoughts couldn't do anything better than become a student of the world's masters. What was she to do? What is there for any of us to do but grab this flare and light it? Pity those flares. Pity those whose flares have not been lit, have floated around in the darkness, unable to conquer ego and learn something. Capoeira regional is new to this country, in North America, USA, but Capoeira Angola hasn't been thought of. Regional is what Macumba is in relation to Angola, in relation to Candomblé. Hear the deeper sounds and rhythms. Valonga is the soul of those of us who want to crawl inside culturally based legacies and eat them. Valonga is the name of a sensitive woman, a sensitive orphan who was not given traditional training. It did her all the good in the world. The world. Now we're getting somewhere. The world. Lots of people in the world. They have different names. They do different things. They have different customs. We're all basically fucked up, but some of us learned how to put a title on it. Fucked Up 101 should be in every junior college brochure. Or it would make the learning process easier. Or maybe it would be better to skip 101 altogether and get out into the world to see what it's really all about. In every explorer's heart there lurks the spirit of the need to. Maybe we should stop there, because those who buy into the spirit of the need to don't need to have themselves explained to themselves. But for the others, fucked up 101. Steady but spontaneous. Hours, days, months, years pass before it is possible to become steady but spontaneous. A lot of people don't believe it's possible to suture those elements. I should say suture. That's the surgical term for suture. Valonga wanted to create a dream book, suture those elements, run her life into an uncontaminated spring. How many of us have ever paid any attention to the lives of cotton farmers we passed through? Questioned the Matador about his reason for being, played with rhythm till he got home. Why would anyone want to do these things? Why would a young African-American woman want to ease away from her turf, seek heart riffs more guttural than aches? But this is purely playing on words. The real stuff is piled up behind us. The real stuff. Why is the question word Valonga Prince of the Princes of Augusta, Georgia, heard from her earliest years. Why Valonga? Why would you black that poor little boy's eyes like that? because he didn't show me the proper respect. We could have told his mother if he had called you a nigger or something. They're civilized white folks. Did he call you a nigger? Jeff Davis? Nah. He'd never think of calling me a name. So explain why you blacked his eyes. I just told you, he didn't show me the proper respect. So you thought that blacking his eyes would make him show the proper respect? No. That was his idea. If I hadn't blacked his eyes, he would have spent years thinking he had a good defense system. I think I did him a favor. Valonga, in her sub-teens, wanted to skin the world back, do the undoable. Esoteric stuff glared at her, forced her to ask questions that few people she knew had an answer for. Dad, why should sumo wrestlers be so huge? Mom, do we have a martial art, Africans? Miss Phillips, why did the drum make us feel like that? Mr. Beck, if all the races in the world are evolutions from the birthplace of the human being, how do we get Japanese? As she grew older and more penetrating, some people ducked when they saw her coming. The braver ones stood their ground and were bowled over. Who's responsible for the idea of a superior being? Does that have anything to do with the Europeans trying to gain control of the earth? No, of course not. Then why are there so many European representation of Jesus, the Son of God? Taste buds grew in her hands, beautiful sounds magnetized to her ears. Her skin became an antenna. She decided to check the world out, seek out the wiser heads, glean as much as she could. Brazil seemed a good place to begin. Brazil, a country of the future, and always will be. Ileana do Nascimento used to say.
Yes. Bless you.
This is chapter 1. And I'm only going to read one chapter because it's been a long day. The Bahian night throbbed with slurred sounds. Musical wings flurried from a distant candomblé ceremony. The echo twang of a lonely berimbau mounted the fragrant air. Valonga sprawled on her narrow bed, bare from the waist up, a film of perspiration coating the narrow valley between her full breasts. Bahia, Africa. San Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. She laced her hands behind her basket-woven braids and closed her eyes, soaking in the smells and sounds, so warm and humid, funky. She reached over to a bedside table for a half-empty bottle of beer, her hand performing a languid search. She swigged from the bottle, poured a few drops of it on her breast and indulgently massaged the liquid into her skin. The chanting drums drew closer, seemed closer. She took another swig of the warm beer and slowly replaced the bottle on the table. Bahia, Brazil. She relaced her hand behind her head, turned to stare out of her second floor window. Even the moon looks more sensual down here. She smiled at the thought and spread her legs wider. Valonga, what are you going to do down there? I'm going to study the dynamics of Capoeira, Angola. Girl, you don't know what you're going to do with yourself, do you? Of course I do. I've always known what I want to do with myself. Her smile broadened. Life was so sweet when people would take off for 3 years to explore their fantasies, do as much as they felt they wanted to do. She took another sip from the bottle. 2 weeks ago, I was in Georgia, home. And now I'm in Bahia, and it feels more like home than Georgia ever felt. She made a quick review of her mental tape, something she often did when she wanted to put her life in perspective. Valonga Prince, of the African-American Princes of Augusta, Georgia, the founder and president of SMI, the stress management consultants for international corporations, the person she had designed herself to be. I think it's silly we should play follow the leader. Everyone is a leader if they're willing to take on that responsibility. The way had been paved by a $300 inheritance from a hard-working father and a more than slightly bohemian mother. Go for it, Valonga. Whatever the hell it is, that's what me and your daddy did. She had taken her mother's advice on more than one occasion and multiplied her inheritance a few times by developing SMI, Stress Management International. She had written about it in the African American press. She was held up as a role model and at 30, pursued by the rich and famous. She slowly sat up on the side of the bed, her body aching slightly from the 6th Capoeira Angola session. Stay down, Valonga. Don't get up. Stay down. Make all movements on the floor. Don't stand up. Her thighs twitched as she stood and walked to the window. Bahia, Bahia, Capoeira Angola, Candomblé, Africanness in another setting. She stood in the open window bare, straddle-legged, her arms folded across her breast, staring down at the cobblestone streets. The scene was almost familiar by now, something the Mexicans and Spaniards would call a plaza. Cobblestone streets trickling off from the plaza, exotic calls and responses echoing, distant smells drifting through our nostrils, garlic, shrimp, palm oil. Bahia seemed to be singing a special song to her. Welcome, Valonga. We are pleased to see you finally. Welcome, Valonga. Is the music lovely to you? Welcome, Valonga. Why did it take you so long to return to us? Welcome, welcome. The man's direct look didn't startle her. It wasn't a malevolent look. Now, she didn't feel as though she was being looked at in a dirty way. He was standing in his window directly across the plaza from her, trying to enjoy the midnight breezes, alert to feelings. He too was naked from the waist up, dark chocolate, gleaming. They took note of each other as though they were scientists. Dark chocolate, muscular male, nut brown skinned female, smooth. Bold black slitted eyes, slow eyes, lush printed lips, sensualist. Valonga heard the shadow of a woman's voice speak the man's name before he smiled in her direction, offered a slight bow, and ceremoniously closed the segregated wooden window behind him. Valonga remained in place, undisturbed by the disappearance of the man in the window across the plaza. There always seemed to be a man staring at me from somewhere in the distance. She looked up at the moon, filled with crinkles of extraterrestrial laughter. Yes, there always seems to be a man staring at me from somewhere. There was a man staring at me from across the inner courtyard in Spain at the Plaza Matute. His name was Machete, and he was a matador, a killer of bulls. His command was direct killing. I am the famous Matador Machete. I've seen you staring at me. I've only seen you once, last Thursday to be exact, and I wasn't staring at you. I want to give you a ticket to see me fight next Sunday. It will be here in Madrid. You will come? It's one of the reasons why I came to Spain, to experience the corrida. How to do this? Experience the corrida. I can have the experience by suffering through what the matadors go through. You can do this? Yeah, I can try. The candomblé sounds were rising and falling, the rhythm swaying against her. The rhythms created a restless energy in her, made her feel the urge to prowl. She calmly hooked her bra on, pulled a t-shirt on, and decided to go for a walk. I cannot believe that someone who has not gone into the bull ring can experience what the matador may feel. Machete was a gypsy from the hills of Alicante, filled with the couth and culture of his people. Allow me to make a believer of you. Take me into the bull ring with you. Valonga Prince, Stress Management Consulting Incorporated president understood the psychic risks involved. Ha! Well, you might become gored by a bull. It is also possible that I might be hit by a Norwegian cab driver. Comprende? Valonga strolled the hilly, crooked streets of her section of Bahian territory, understanding the stares of the men who stared at her lush, Choctaw African French behind. She understood that. It felt good to her to be physically appreciated as a woman with a gorgeous shape. She felt the urge to scream out, "Hey, I'm fine, can you dig it? And I got brains too." There was no need to do it. There were 3 large African-American brothers trailing her, offering a degree of fear and an element of rape. She felt the faint urge of an uncontrollable panic as she turned the corner and made 2 simultaneous realizations. Number 1, the street was unlit, and number 2, the 3 men were walking beside her. She decided to go down fighting. She placed her back to the wall and turned to face them with a mean look. "What do you want?" They smiled. The shorter of the 3 spoke. "We're capoeiristas, we you capoeira Angola." She shared their smiles. Of course, Enrique, Nelson, and Curio, her classmates at the Academia Capoeira Angola. Yes, of course, I didn't recognize you guys for a minute. They exchanged rapid soft Bahian Portuguese for a minute before Curio, the English speaker, translated. "You were scared shitless, huh?" One could say that, "Hey, where could a lady go for a nice cold beer? Come on, we take." She stared over the Capoeira at the huge bull prancing across the ring. Machete's 3rd and the last bull of the afternoon. This bull was what the Spanish called un auténtico catedral. Un auténtico catedral. A 5-year-old from the finca of Don Juan Belmonte Garcia of Seville. Valonga felt disgusted. In a mano fighting 3 bulls each, Machete had demonstrated all of the bullfighter's worst traits with his first 2 bulls. He had played the first bull so far away from him the crowd whistled like a forest of birds. The second bull, a superior animal, was a catalyst for an attack of cowardice that most of the afición had never seen before. Machete had dived behind the bulladera like one of his helpers. He had retreated disgracefully before the bulls on a straight-ahead charge. He had earned the cynical, sarcastic comments from every section of the arena. "Have you earned too much money, Matador? Have you no shame to call yourself a bullfighter? Use your pistol, man. Shoot it before you dishonor the woman who had you. Machete, you bum!" Valonga felt the irresistible urge to leave her choice seat and forget about the Matador called Machete. If only I had known what a cheat this guy is. How could the bullfight books glorify this man? Were the pictures faked? Valonga's urge to leave was canceled by an ambiguous feeling. Yeah, I'm his guest. How can I leave? She was beginning to understand the meaning of nobility in an animal, watching the bull called Brujo. Brujo was taken to the horses, received 2 picks, despite the fact that he clearly demonstrated the ability to absorb more punishment. Valonga stared at Machete's expression. His eyes were gleaming, and the solemn look he'd held in place for the previous 2 bulls had disappeared. He waved the bandilleros in his quadrilla back and took the sticks himself. The afición whistled, some simply frowned. Machete never placed the sticks. Why is he doing it now? The first pair of banderillas stunned him into silence. The second pair placed his machete faked to his left and neatly dropped them onto the bull's hump as he rumbled past, caused the afición to erupt with "Olés!" and applause. The third pair of sticks broke it in half on the edge of the barrera and placed as cleanly as 2 pins and a cushion pulled effervescent applause from the audience. Valonga settled back into her seat. Was this guy some kind of magician or what? He had suddenly taken him from his degraded position as a dishonorable matador to another level. The crude twisting and turning he had done with bulls number 1 and 2 were gone. The awkward motions. He was into a faena that the afición would talk about for years. She telescopes the scene, trying to figure out some things. The first bull had been as large, the second one as muscular, both of them filled with courage and speed. She didn't know the name for all of the movements Machete was performing with this bull called brujo, but she clearly understood that each movement hinted at death. He used the muleta as though it were a garden gate, gently swinging it open inches in front of Brujo's huge horns. Left-handed naturales. He performed aferralos with the left and right hands, the bull's left and right horns barely missing his eye and skull by inches. Machete was giving the bull a fair fight. He was not avoiding the possibility of being killed or injured. He was giving the bull a fair fight. He even stopped the whole thing to kiss the bull on the testus, the forehead. A daring alarde that placed the arena into a screaming madhouse. Machete strolled away from the bull's horns, a pleasant expression on his face, an unexpressible arrogance glowing from his movement. Sandunga. Valonga folded her arms, amazed at the change of moods. A few minutes ago, he was the asshole of the country. Now, he's the toast of the world. He lined the bull up by slowly moving his muleta from left to right. He profiled a second later and plunged his sword deeply into the area between the bull's shoulder blades. She was on the verge of screaming for a second, bewildered by the blurred configuration of man, cape, sword, and bull. When the pattern cleared itself, the bull had charged the cape in the man's left hand, deflected away from the bull's body as Machete plunged the bull in with the right hand. Machete had crossed over perfectly. He stood in front of the bull, his arms spread as though he were receiving an offering. The crowd in the arena, screaming and clapping their hands, were obviously far away from his consciousness. Machete caught her eye and exchanged thoughts with her as the bull hemorrhaged and keeled over stiff-legged, dead, but unaware of it. This is it, Machete seemed to be saying with his eyes. This is it, him or me. I won this time. The same crowd that whistled earlier carried Machete around the arena on their shoulders, shouting his name and praising him. Praising him. The next day, she rode beside him on his bull ranch, trying to absorb the feelings of a 150-pound man who had walked into the arena with 3 animals, weighing half a ton each, armed with a piece of cloth, and had survived. What is the feeling? What is the feeling? Yes, what is the feeling? What was the feeling for you yesterday with the first 2 bulls? Machete stared at a herd of his prior bulls in a distant pasture, the build of his cap placing his face in shadows. I felt the horns of each of them in my body, and I was completely terrified. You must be gored by the bulls to understand what a fear this is. I've been gored many times. They thought I was finished after I was gored in my left buttock. If the horn had been closer, it would have gone into my rectum. Valonga involuntarily made a distasteful expression. Machete laughed, swaying with the rhythm of the slow walking horses. I understand, Valonga. I truly understand. It is an ugly thing to talk about. So why do you do it if things like that might happen? He glanced at her from the corner of his eye, a sneer on his mouth. You have never been hungry in your life, I can tell. You have no idea what it means to go to bed hungry night after night for years. You reach the point of not caring how you get a plate of food a piece of bread, a soft place to sleep. Some become pickpockets, prostitutes, businessmen, flunkies, emotional suicides, actors. Some of the most spiritually inclined become bullfighters or priests. She had heard the connection made before. What's spirituality got to do with fighting a bull? He reined up and dismounted, motioning for her to do the same. Look, come. Let us walk for a bit. There's a cool stream just beyond these rocks in that grove of trees. They strolled toward the trees, the hot African sun beaming down on them, summertime in Seville, Moorish Spain. Machete was quiet until they entered the shade of the trees, sat on some rock near the narrow stream. The spiritual part is not always there. It wasn't there for me with the first two bulls yesterday. I felt nothing but fear. And the fear prevented me from behaving in a sacred manner. But you must admit it was there for Brujo. She nodded in agreement. No one can explain why it is there, why it is not there. There are times when I feel it will be there and it's not, and I'm surprised. At other times, when it shouldn't be there, it is. It happened last year in Valencia, for example. I was high and the bulls were treacherous. I had the feeling that both of my bulls had been fought before. It seemed that they clearly understood the difference between me, the man, and the muleta. But they couldn't touch me. I was, how do you say, invincible. I could do anything. Valonga suddenly froze as four bulls casually strolled up to the water about 10 yards downstream. They looked like prehistoric monsters. Keep your voice low. They may not notice us. They have their own conversations. They stared at the bulls, measuring the size of their horns, the huge hump of muscle above the shoulders, their heavy, sleek bodies. The bulls glanced up at them in a nearsighted way a couple of times, and finally, after long minutes of drinking, they ambled away, disappearing into the trees. I never realized how wild they are. Yes. You see now that we are the tame ones, and they are the wild, free ones. They took off their boots and dangled their feet in the stream. Valonga, you understand now, we are priests. We are the men who take the chances in the arena, who make the sacrifices so that certain forces in our deeper feelings will be eased by the blood. We are priests. She looked down at the rocks in the stream. Can anyone ever become a priest? Maybe yes, maybe no. The bulls determined that. They pick and choose. They put the boots back on and started back to the grand ranch home that overlooked his 1,000 acres. Will I have a chance to experience this screening out process? We will be fighting calves this afternoon after the siesta.
Okay.
We will see what you got, girl. Flamenco started the afternoon. Valonga slid off of her siesta bed and stared at Machete sprawled in a nearby chair. It would be better if I took my siesta in your room. It will make people think better of me, that I'm macho. Sometimes people make up stories, you know what I mean? What will they think of me? You're outside our culture, it doesn't matter. You're a black American woman, you can do, but people think that you can do everything. You could pull up your dress and shit in the streets and people would applaud you. This is southern Spain. This is where we civilize the Europeans. But you're a Spaniard, or European. No, Valonga, I'm a gypsy, a gitano. Being a gypsy in Spain is like what was like to be black in America. We are African from Egypt, many centuries ago. And many of them hate us because of our history, like your people in America. Some of them love us because of our history, but they cannot get rid of it, you know. For some people, the image of Spain is the gypsy soul. Everything was cool so long as Machete could pretend that he was fucking Valonga just for the sake of appearances. bullfighting etiquette demanded. Spain demanded it. She shook him awake from his nap on the sofa in her room. "It is time?" he asked, his eyes opening to focus on a faraway point. "It is time," she answered, solemnly going with the moment. He left her room, gently closing the door behind. "See you in the arena." They're going to have for the little bull testing called tienta, where they test the female bulls because the female gives birth, and you couldn't test the male bull and then 2 or 3 years later fight him in the bull ring because the bull memory is so long that he would remember the cape and the whole thing. So they test the females to see whether they are worthy of giving birth to brave bulls. That's, I think, one of the reasons they call it the fiesta brava.
Well, you know, it's interesting to me because you saw that documentary on crows and how crows tell their youngins, you know, what to watch out for. If a man looks like this, blah, blah, blah. And so it seems like a mama bull would say, "I had this really bad experience."
Well, she would do that if she had a chance, but she won't have a chance because they take the bulls, the males, away from the females as soon as, almost as soon as they're born.
Oh.
Yeah, they would do that.
No wonder they'd be angry, take away from mama.
Okay, yeah, because they would be, the female would be telling, "Hey, you see a man with a little red cloth waving in front, don't go for the red cloth, go for the waver." So, yeah, that's a very interesting little point. So this is where it is, this is where it begins.
Well, thank you. I saw some familiar names. You got the Capoeira.
I'm interweaving the Brazilian with the Spanish because she...
Then you mentioned Timba in the book.
Of course. Timba was one of my teachers up in Oakland, over there in San Pablo, and he was a very fine teacher, is a very fine teacher. I really hate that I moved from Oakland because I had to, and returned to LA, where there are no Capoeira Angolas that I know of. The studios where we knew there was a Capoeira class, they were teaching as though it was some sort of exercise class, something. You want to come and lose weight, you know, like fat people who can't play Capoeira. I've seen a whole bunch of them. So that's where we are at this point.
All right, I thoroughly enjoyed the reading.
I'm so glad you did. It was
Brazilian Nights.
Brazilian Nights.
All right. And so that can be purchased at iUniverse, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Your website is www.odiehawkins.com. Let me zoom in here. Okay.
Hey, Toro.
And you're also on Amazon's authors page. So thank you very much.
Hey, Toro. Hey.
Thank you very, very much. Okay.
Hey. Juízo. That's Brazilian. Look out.
Ah.
Juízo.
Juízo. Ah. Live and learn.
There was a master named Juízo.
Ah.
Who was going to be teaching one of Valonga's teachers.
Ah. Gotcha. All right. Until the next reading.
That's right.
All right. Enjoy your day.
Oh, and I want to thank Steve Johnson for his wonderful, for giving us the information about how the Native Americans welcomed the Europeans without any documentation, passport, anything.
Right, feeding them.
And I'm sure they didn't give them a turkey, but they gave them some venison. You know.
Something.
Keep them from starving.
They fed them at least.
And in return, the only thing that the Europeans could think of doing was stealing the Indians' land from them.
Go figure. Moving right along.
All right.
Okay. Next time.
You got that.
Ciao.
Ciao.